Assalamu alaikum and welcome. This is AIMA. We are based in St. Louis, Missouri, and you are listening to IME Live. I'm your host, Jamie Dodd. I'd like to share some thoughts with you today about the need for the American Islamic Montessori Association, or AIMA. In particular, we would like to focus on some of the reasons that we at AIMA believe AMS and AMI are inadequate for representing the interests and the purpose of Islamic Montessori schools across the country. I'd like to begin by stating that despite the multitude of American and international fans of Montessori education, and despite its celebrity as a superior method for teaching young children, neither the term Montessori nor the methodology itself bear any patent, trademark, or copyright protection. None whatsoever. Now, some of you are already well aware of this, but many are not. This often comes as a surprise to new teachers and to parents alike, and it might explain why even some parents whose children already attend a Montessori school might struggle to articulate what Montessori is and precisely how it differs from a traditional school education. The absence of legal protection for the term has led many people to conclude, erroneously, that Montessori must be an open source method of education. The fact is, however, nothing could be further from the truth. Wikipedia defines open source as content that is made freely available for possible modification and redistribution. In an open source world, all things are negotiable. And while this might make Montessori feel more accessible or more democratic, it's a misnomer that only compounds the confusion that already plagues Montessori. Confusion around what defines Montessori is not new. There are a variety of reasons for it, and one of the most problematic is misrepresentation by some schools that choose to include the term Montessori in their name or in their program description as a way to attract enrollment, even though they have no Montessori credentialed teachers and no Montessori school affiliation. That's a problem. But one of the most common reasons for confusion about Montessori arises from the simple lack of precision in its practice. This is something of which even an experienced teacher might on occasion be guilty. And despite the best intentions, this can and does happen in Montessori classrooms every day. Once in a while, it even happens in Montessori teacher education programs. But the cumulative effect of all the confusion that swirls about the definition of Montessori is the erosion of fidelity to the methods and practice of Dr. Montessori's seminal theory. And this should be a matter of concern for all of us, particularly those of us who are directly involved in the acquisition or delivery of a Montessori education, like parents and teachers. Some of our strongest professional membership organizations recognized this problem early on, and they did step in to address it. And they did this by establishing minimum standards for Montessori education. This was a great place to begin because standards provide basic guidelines that everyone can implement, everyone can follow and practice. And this naturally reinforces theoretical fidelity and it elevates program quality across the board. And because this effort was led by our professional organizations, and because it seemed to be aimed at helping Montessori teachers to better serve Montessori students, it was widely embraced. And over the years, our Montessori professional organizations successfully galvanized their efforts to represent and to serve the greater Montessori community. Through this process, they've developed an incredible momentum, and especially in recent years, they've come to exert a massive influence across the entire Montessori world. As their influence has expanded, their guidelines have too. But more importantly, their guidelines have evolved. This has become increasingly evident of late, and in response, a growing body of Montessori professionals has begun to ask questions about the direction of our professional organizations. Their questions, unfortunately, have been largely dismissed, ignored, and effectively silenced. When this kind of thing happens in the real world, questions tend to morph into concerns, and that's what's occurred here. the concerns that have been expressed center on the idea that our professional organizations may have confounded the construct of Montessori with the context of the culture in which it was incubated. Specifically, what we're talking about is a prevailing progressive social agenda of Western society. The logical extension of this line of thought suggests a circumstance in which Montessori has been distorted, reconstituted, and distilled into a new brand of Dr. Montessori's actual theory, and that this brand is propagated not for the purpose of expanding enlightenment in the world, but for the purpose of gaining some strategic advantage. The question we need to ask then is whether our professional organizations have become vehicles for disseminating Western culture and ideology across the globe under the banner of Montessori education. If this is true, this effectively transforms an organization like AMS into a Trojan horse for the dissemination of the progressive values it's come to represent. This is a problem, not only for Montessori, but for all education. And the crux of the issue is this: whether Montessori education has in fact been rebranded to reflect Western society and its progressive ideology, and if so, whether and to what extent this reconstituted brand of Montessori has been assimilated into the strategic goals and objectives of our professional organizations. And if so, whether this reconstituted brand of Montessori is being actively exported by these membership organizations vis-a-vis their power and influence around the globe. How serious is all this business really, you might ask? Well, it's very serious. The enmeshment of construct and context is more than simply a departure from convention in research. It is a fundamental and substantive error. Some would call it an abuse in the application of the scientific method. To concede to it, to allow it to continue unabated, is to undermine the very integrity of Dr. Montessori's work. She was a trained and highly skilled physician, and the entirety of her life's work is based in science and in the scientific method. It should go without saying, but the implications of enmeshment in research are beyond profound. Flawed methodology will bring the validity of a study or an entire body of work into question. And when our professional organizations overlook, endorse, or perish the thought, engage in this practice, they become the vehicles that drive the transmission, the dissemination, and the export of ethnocentrism. In this case, the ethnocentrism of progressive American culture and values. There is no greater affront to truth than the perversion of the scientific method for the purpose of expanding and perpetuating ethnocentrism. At the heart of the question is whether our professional organizations are actually guided by absolute principles and values, or whether their direction is subject to influence by the transitory and mutating attitudes of the cultures in which they operate. This has caused some members of our profession to question and to reevaluate our Montessori organizations. Naturally, it raises concern on multiple levels, prompting some of us to wonder about their level of commitment to transparency and operational integrity, to wonder about their level of commitment to precision in the practice of scientific method, and to wonder about their recognition of the gravity of their influence in the global educational community, as well as their willingness to take ownership for their responsibility in ensuring integrity in the profession of Montessori education. It is an absolute certainty that the ideas I'm advancing here will serve as a lightning rod for debate, as well they should, for this subject matter is of fundamental concern to every Montessori school in operation, and it's something with which every Islamic school in the nation today is grappling. It's becoming increasingly apparent that our professional Montessori organizations do not reflect Islamic values. And if the propositions outlined above in this presentation are true, it's likely they never will. It's imperative that we distinguish professional organizations from Montessori education itself, because they're not one and the same. Professional organizations are easily politicized, particularly in today's climate, and their influence can be bought and sold to satisfy the appetites of the powerful to the detriment of the masses. We believe this is happening today, And this is what makes AIMA so relevant and so valuable. The professional membership organization of AIMA is not and will never be at risk of influence or intrusion by the changing attitudes of society and culture, because it is securely anchored in the timeless and immutable tenets of Islam. Indeed, it's this very fact that protects AIMA and ensures it will be spared the kind of distortion that has infiltrated and hijacked the essential purpose of our other professional organizations. We need to be critical consumers when selecting a professional membership organization to represent our interests and to serve as our megaphone to the world. What our community, and indeed what our nation, needs now is our dedicated engagement in a collective effort to move AIMA forward. We must invest in growing AIMA as a robust and influential collaborative for enlightened education. We need to focus on expanding our efforts through meaningful research that is designed and infused with the utmost scientific rigor. This is what will aid us in defining and in refining best practices in Islamic Montessori education. Lastly, we must explore, develop, and expand, and we must share our knowledge with Islamic educators in schools across the U.S. I ask you to please join us in the effort to reinstate enlightenment to the domain of education. This is so desperately needed in the West and around the world. We can accomplish this together through the advancement of AIMA. There exists a persistent and imperative need for AIMA. AMS is simply not enough.